Today is, I was a history major. I love American history. And I've been incredibly excited to have this guest on since I saw him speak at the Movers and Shakers some time ago. Our guest today is Johnny Morris, a Vietnam era naval aviator. Today and most likely next week, we're going to learn about the men and women that fought and sacrificed for our great country and our way of life during the Vietnam experience. First off, thank you, Johnny, for your service.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I hope you get told that a lot. Y'all clearly deserve it. All right, Johnny, take us to Vietnam.
Well, good morning. My name is Johnny Morris, and I was invited by Rick to speak with you this morning about my experiences as a United States naval aviator flying from an aircraft carrier in combat. A little background is I was trained to fight an F-4 Phantom II jet aircraft with tactics that were employed in World War II and in Korea in air-to-air combat engagements known as dogfighting. That tactic quickly proved to be outdated in air-to-air engagements, and we lost 8 F-4 and 16 naval aviator crew members who were either killed or taken prisoner after ejecting from their airplanes that had been outmaneuvered by the Russian pilots. Yes, I said the Russian pilots that were flying the MiG-21 modern jet fighters. A MiG is a Russian-made jet fighter.
I thought the war was with Vietnam.
Yes, many people thought we were fighting the Vietnam pilots, but we were not. The Russians had provided Vietnam with all the anti-aircraft weaponry, all of the radar-guided missiles that we called SAMs. I provided them with training, but Russian fighter pilots flew their fighter aircraft referred to as MiG, M-I-G, MiG-21. Our F-4 aircraft were heavier and could not turn into tight circles upon an engagement with the MiGs. Therefore, they could outmaneuver us and eventually able to shoot down our aircraft, resulting in loss of the F-4 and forcing the crew to eject at high speeds around 500 miles an hour, causing great injury and even death. Those that survived and landed in North Vietnam were taken prisoners. Our Air Wing commander ordered a stop of flying missions until we studied the issues and determined that we had to change our tactic, resulting in a new training program known as Top Gun.
I've heard that somewhere.
Yes, that later became the Navy Fighter Weapons Training Program. We developed the tactics that were favorable to fighting the F-4 Phantom in air-to-air combat maneuvering that resulted in highly successful missions and much less loss of airplanes and aviators. The basic tactic that we involved to fight the enemy in a vertical maneuver of diving the F-4 at 600 miles an hour in order to gain separation from the MiG and then pull maximum 8G forces to reverse our diving airplane into a climbing airplane at maximum afterburner and then meet that enemy MiG head on as they were diving down attempting to follow us. We were able to fire our radar control missiles at the MiG, thereby hitting them before they could even get off a single shot at us. We turned the tide to victory for our aviators. MiG Alley was a corridor of mountain chain that the MiG pilots would fly in the valleys between the mountains in an effort to hide from the F-4 Phantoms. Our radar was far advanced than theirs, and we could detect them before they could visually see us, resulting in many MiGs shot down. We became known as the MiG Alley Fighters, and were able to keep the MiGs from attacking our A-7 and A-6 bomber aircraft that did not have any gun protection on their airplanes. The maneuvers that we developed 50 plus years ago have been continued and employed along with additional more air-to-air maneuvers that are taught to our current naval aviator fighter pilots in training and also at Top Gun. I'm very proud to have been a small part of development and actual combat engagement of those new tactics. We were instrumental in saving many United States Naval Aviator crew member lives and a tremendous number of fighter airplanes. I was ordered on board the USS Forrestal to fly with Fighter Squadron 11. However,
What year would that have been?
that was in 1967. And Fighter Squadron 11, by the way, was known as the Red Rippers. That was their call sign.
What was your call sign?
My personal call sign was Wild Child.
How does someone get a? I don't know that we want to. This I keep this show G for general audience. Can you explain how you got called Wild Child, keeping it G?
Well, I think it was because when I was on board the America, which was a later story, I had flown more missions than, let me say, several more missions than many of our newer naval aviators that were on board. And so I would show them maneuvers as to how to attack the enemy, both in the air and also how to deliver ordnance without getting shot down, because they were trained differently in the United States training program than we had to fly in Vietnam to survive. And many of them eventually began to call me, "Hey, that guy's a wild child. He flies close and fast." And I could go on, but our audience might not enjoy that. Back to the Forrestal. Before I checked in for duty on the USS Forrestal, in naval lingo was she was CVA 59. Many of our Navy people that are out in the audience will remember the Forrestal. She was the first supercarrier that the United States built. She was an oil burner, and she was built basically to handle, if you will, the high speeds of the F-8 Crusader, which I flew the F-4 Phantom that replaced the F-8 Crusader. Both of those aircraft had high takeoff speeds and high landing speeds and were unable to land on the earlier aircraft carriers simply because it was not designed and built to withstand the speed and the weight of those aircraft. Back to the Forrestal. The ship experienced a severe fire on July 29, 1967, while operating in Vietnam on Yankee Station off the shores of North Vietnam. That fire killed 134 sailors and naval aviators. It injured a number 161 that were on the deck and destroyed 21 of our fighter and bomber aircraft. At 10:50 a.m. on the 29th of July, the air boss, who was the person that ran the tower, if you will, of the USS Forrestal, commenced an 11 a.m. launch of a 24 airplane Alpha strike. That was the second day of our mission runs for that particular line period. At that time, a VF-11 F4, and the side number was 110, was spotted on the extreme starboard quarter of the flight deck. As the pilot of the F4B number 1110 shifted internally from external to internal power, multiple electrical malfunctions ignited one of the four 5-inch Mark 32 Zuni unguided rockets in a pod on his external stores, which fired across the flight deck and struck a VF-46 A4 bomber number 105, piloted by Lieutenant Commander Fred White, rupturing its fuel tank, igniting the fuel, and initiating the fire. The rocket hit number 405 and the plane next to it, number 416, piloted by Lieutenant Commander John McCain. The rocket itself actually impacted the ocean after it went through both aircraft. Shrapnel ripped into both aircraft, and both were immediately sprayed by fuel. A pool of fuel ignited between and under the two aircraft. Both pilots initially escaped from the flames around their aircraft. The impact of the Zuni rocket dislodged two 1,000-pound bombs.
And right after these commercial messages, we'll get back. Thanks for listening, folks. Hope you're enjoying. Folks, one of my favorite things about living here in our beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains is the community and the people that make up our community. And today's guest is one of the gentlemen that inspiration, a lot of respect for. And that's Johnny Morris. He is a Vietnam-era naval aviator. And back to the story, Johnny.
Okay, thank you, Rick. I was speaking about the impact of the Zuni rocket's dislodged 1,000-pound bombs, which fell into the flames. And outdated 1,000-pound bombs were being used because of acute shortage of modern-day general-purpose 1,000-pound bombs from the intense Navy bombing campaign in North Vietnam. The bombs were in very poor condition because they had been stored, would you believe, from the Korean War and brought to us to use because in the United States, the manufacturing of bombs of that size had slowed down, and there was something going on that made the bombs shorter to get to us. So we were utilizing ordnance that was over a decade old and in very poor condition and considered an extreme safety hazard. So a little more after 1 minute after the fire started on the USS Forrestal in 1967, one of the 1,000-pound bombs actually fractured open. And at 1 minute and 34 seconds, that bomb exploded, killing almost the entire firefighter team. And also Lieutenant Commander White, whose aircraft was the one the missile hit. A second 1,000-pound bomb exploded 9 seconds later, and a chain reaction followed. Both of these aircraft that were hit, fully fueled and loaded with their own bombs, were destroyed by the blast, and in 4 minutes, 7 major explosions shook the entire ship, and some 40,000 gallons of jet fuel from the aircraft on the fight deck were ignited and contributed to the damage and, of course, the death of the many, many team members that were on board. The fire spread with the first explosion to every aircraft across the entire deck. 7 holes were ripped through the deck. Bombs and rockets and 20-millimeter shots across the deck. Ejection seats fired into the air. Most of the pilots on the aft of the flight deck were able to escape, but 2 more, besides Lieutenant Commander White, Lieutenant Dennis Barton, and Lieutenant Commander Jerry Sark, were killed in the explosions. Lieutenant Commander McCain was helping another pilot who was on fire when the first explosion occurred, and he barely escaped by rolling into the port catwalk. 3 months later, on October 26, 1967, flying from the USS Oriskany aircraft carrier, Lieutenant Commander McCain would be shot down over North Vietnam on his 23rd bombing mission and was captured and became a POW in the prison in excess of 5 years.
Hanoi Hilton.
Yes, he was in the infamous, if you will, Hanoi Hilton. Below decks, firefighters and teams of sailors and Marines were extinguishing the fire. Much of the difficulty to put the fire out was due to the bomb explosions and the fuel. The damage to USS Forrestal was so severe that she had to leave the Yankee station in Vietnam for repairs all the way back to the United States. For those of you that might be interested in seeing this in actuality, there are two films, training films that were utilized to train future naval aviators and also sailors on aircraft carriers. The name of one training film is Learn or Burn. That included film from the flight deck camera that filmed the entire Forrestal event. And another is named Trial by Fire, A Carrier Fights for Life. These have influenced countless firefighting damage control and recruit training classes over the years and are still shown today in training of both naval aviators and also sailors that are working on board an aircraft carrier. My personal orders were changed, and I remained at NAS Oceana, Virginia Air Base for several months before I was reassigned to VF-33 that had then been ordered to Vietnam early in 1968.
All right, Johnny, I have a few questions. First off, how did you start flying to begin with?
When I was 16 years old in New Bern, North Carolina, I was enthralled by the crop dusters that were dusting the various crops that were grown there in that tobacco country. And I actually asked to fly in the back seat of a crop duster, was the one that my father knew, and it excited me so that I would work, earn money, and then go pay to learn to fly in Piper Cubs until I was graduated from high school. And then on through college, I still was enthused by airplanes. I continued to try to learn to fly and earn my private pilot license. So I enrolled in Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University and graduated from there as a commercial pilot and an instructor and began to instruct at Embry-Riddle until I got drafted. Oh, yes. I didn't want to be drafted, so I went to the draft board and begged them to allow me to join another service that I could fly in. They did, I did, and I ended up in the United States Navy, 24 months training, and then I began to fly F-4 Phantoms.
Landing on an aircraft carrier versus landing on land.
Oh, that's the difference between pilots, let's say Air Force pilots, hello Air Force buddies, and naval aviators, hello my friends. Naval aviators are trained, excessively trained, I might add, to land on-board aircraft carriers at 200 miles an hour, and the arresting gear will stop them in 200 feet. They never hit their brakes. Launching from the aircraft carrier, you launch on a catapult that actually pulls the aircraft at very high speed off the front end of that aircraft carrier. Your engines are roaring in full afterburner, and you have to be at end speed, it's called, at 180 knots.
And folks, we'll get to the rest of the story next week. Thank you, Johnny. I'm looking forward to next week's show. This has been really educational and interesting. Thank you.